So I consider the Earth type the best typing in the game, mainly because of their Loomians and how strong the Earth typing is. So I decided to make a tier list showing how good they are with my opinions and thoughts and experiences and research that I've done separately for each of them. So with that out of the way, this is Con Stoops and this is the Earth type tier list. So I think first off, I'm going to start off with the B tier. I'm going to briefly give my thoughts on each of them first and then dive into, of course, the why I put them into the B tier. And I'm going to start off with Borok, who's going to be put into the B tier. I definitely think that Borok, with the right Loomians and the right setup, that Borok can start steamrolling a lot of Loomians. Borok specializes in a lot of slower team comps, which not have been meta right now, but it's still a lot of comps as of right now, which makes Borok pretty great because its speed tier of base 68 speed is really bad, especially in today's standards. So Borok, in any given setting, at a regular setting in the OU metagame, Borok is outsped by almost everything except for a few walls. This is one of Borok's disadvantages because, of course, you can't be a good offensive Loomian if you can't outspeed offensive and defensive Loomians. So Borok on that front is pretty bad as well. However, it would be good if it was a little bit more bulky, but other than bulk up helping its bulk out, it doesn't really have that much bulk. Also, its range defense is really low, and when you combine the fact that its earth typing doesn't have a lot of resistances or weaknesses, this means that Borok is going to be taking neutral hits all the time. So this means that this spot for Borok is a lot more solidified and dangerous, because once Borok gets on the field in a regular OU match, whatever is out in front of you is going to outspeed you 99% of the time. And while you do have the argument of running quick pounds, first of all, Typeless isn't a good solo coverage. It's resisted by Spirit and Metal, which is all over the Metal is not Metal, resisted by Spirit, Metal, and Ice, which is all over the metagame, which hurts this chances even further. So Borok doesn't have a lot of options here. It still hits decently hard, but the metagame's rise in power of melee attackers also discludes this thing even further, because now Borok's boost is now going to be much lower compared to previous metagames. So B tier is where I'll be putting it. I don't see it going up here until the metagame is a lot more slower and the walls have not a lot of good counterplay against Borok. I do think that it can go lower, but B is where I'm keeping it for now. So for the next Earth type, we're going to be talking about Gargolem Defense. I kind of already broke my rule, but whatever. Gargolem Defense's main problem isn't in its bulk or its typing. It's actually in its offensive paralysis. And I'm probably not going to be the first one to say it, but I still think that Gargolem Defense doesn't have a lot of offer. Because it only has good bulk, it has to rely on moves to actually make it be used over other walls that might not have the best bulk compared to it, but have a lot more offensive or utility-based pressure. For Gargolem Defense, this comes in with Health Gift, Tamp, which is not really that great because it has no defensive scaling moves, and Driving Force. I might have missed like barbs or something, but overall this is pretty bad for a wall, because without Driving Force you are basically going to be setting up on this 99% of the time, which is really bad for this thing, because once Gargolem Defense is on the battle, that means most offensive Loomians, no matter how not bulky they can still take hits from Gargolem Defense and can set up their own damage, leading for the opponent to get an advantage over you because of their setup of defenses and attacks. This means that Gargolem Defense is basically free setup at that point, which is not worth using at all. And if you do want to argue that its utility is enough to make it viable up here, you do have better barb setters like Seer Knight and Wavlisk if you want to go for that defensive route. And you do have offensive barb setters like Gargolem regular, Gargolem Speed, and Gobdemic. So you don't really have that barb potential over there as well. And this is not a really good place for it because in the metagame, ice types are all over the place, which hurts this thing's viability even more. You do have Himber, Conjulant, and Wintrix all being very common, as well as Barbadger being in the OU metagame. So this hurts its chances even more. So the way I see this with Gargolem defense is until it gets some offensive pressure other than driving force, it's going to be staying in the bottom of B tier for now. But I do recognize its strengths because obviously it's that good of a Loomian. So yeah. Next one, I'm going to be talking about Himber and Gargolem Speed. For Himber, I'm placing Himber in the B+, mainly because I still cannot think that Himber is going to be a good Loomian right now because of how much things wall it. But I've recently looked into it more, and Himber has a lot of utility, specifically against Earth. Not Earth, but specifically against air and bug types. Himber is one of the best offensive Loomians to use against bug types, other than, of course, other air types. So Himber is going to be pretty good there. Icicle Traps is kind of in demand right now because of the Gargolems in the metagame, which is pretty good for Himber too. And it does have pretty good strong coverage, and while its defensive typing may be bad on paper, it definitely can be pretty good against the air types like I just said, and being a good utility using its electric immunity to switch into other Loomians. While I do think that Himber is probably not as good, and I'm just not looking into it as much because I still think that Himber is being overhyped a lot, I kind of do have to give it credit for how much defensive utility it can provide for a bulky offensive Loomian. Himber's moveset, while it being pretty good, it still has a lacking 3rd and 4th move slot because Bards is just a better hazard right now. So I think the B+ tier is good for Himber. As for Gargolem Speed, I kind of want to put it lower, but I do realize how good it is specifically in a double hazard setting team where Gobdemic can be your early game barb setter and Gargolem Speed can be your late game or mid game hazard setter. And while it's not used for that, obviously I know that for sure, but Gargolem Speed and Gobdemic, which if you didn't know, on traditional hyper offensive teams in Pokemon, having 1 or 2 hazard leads is really good. And of course, Gargolem Speed having that speed factor to basically revenge kill 9 times out of 10 every time makes Gargolem Speed a pretty good hazard leader. I cannot see it going down or up, so Gargolem Speed is where I'm putting it. And now for the A tier Loomians, I'm going to be discussing Baneki first because I think Baneki should be considered for on its own right now. And Baneki's defensive typing, being able to be immune to all pivot moves except Fade Away, is really good. Zip Zap and Flash and Flee might not be the most scariest things out of all, but Baneki is a really solid counter to Phage Knot, which is really running wild in this metagame. It's really good against Flash and Flee Loomians like Luminami and other stuff like that, and against Zip Zap Loomians like Razulong. It's really good for stopping pivots, and because Baneki is typically a fast Loomian, all those defensive pivots will be fearing it right now because of its coverage, which ironically enough also threatens most of the pivoters in the entire game, which helps for Baneki's case. And for the most broken part about it is Earthquake and Poison, which together makes a really strong combo. If you didn't know, only toxic types except Stratosaur can only be immune to Poison. However, when you have a Loomian with an Earth type move that can hit all of those Poison types super effectively, and I guess you can make an exception for Snagoop because it's an air type, so it's immune to Earth types as of right now. This means that the Earth and Toxic coverage is going to be really strong for any Toxic type. Basically, no Toxic type wants to swap in on Baneki because while Poison can absorb that, but they cannot absorb an Earthquake. This leads Baneki to poison anything in the game without any repercussions, because Baneki will just kill them the next turn if with landslide. So that makes Baneki really offensively pressuring when you compound that with its really good defensive typing. This makes Baneki a really strong Loomian. Now, there is the cases of course, things can run Mysterious Dust, I know that, but that doesn't really limit Baneki at all, because the stuff that do want to switch in on poison, they're still going to be hit by Earthquake. So I think this is still a pretty good spot for Baneki. It has a lot of good utility, its coverage is strong, and poison is really terrifying because this means that Baneki can poison everything in the game other than Snagoop and Stratosaur. Snagoop's not being as used as much, and Stratosaur is very easy to deal with. So this makes Baneki really, really good. I cannot put it lower than that, but I can see it going up into the tier. So yes. Next one, we have Gargolem regular and Garbantis in the B+ tier. Garbantis, for me, I kind of overhyped it in the beginning because obviously bug and brawler coverage, it's pretty good in this metagame because of the ice types running around, the plant types being able for Garbantis to hit. But the problems of Garbantis kind of overshadowed my thinking, mainly because of, the main reason why Garbantis fell out of the metagame was because it simply didn't hit hard enough, its coverage wasn't threatening, and its overall defensive typing's not that great. So yeah, and its bulk isn't as good as before because of the meta's rising in power. This is more so of the case, but because of how good Garbantis is in UU and it can make a run for it in the OU metagame, I cannot simply deny that. It finally now has counterplay against ice types, which it desperately needed. And while I guess you can say the argument of air types can switch in on Garbantis, what other air types other than Stratosaur, which doesn't really want to take a body crash, or Zeppelin would really want to switch in on Garbantis? And I guess you can count the Gargolems or Wintrix, but that's not a lot. Garbantis still has offensive coverage that's still pretty good. It now has ways to deal with ice types, and it's a pretty good soft check for most, but not a lot of the metagame. So I can give it credit for that. Next one we're going to be talking about is Gargolem regular, and I do admit I kind of overhyped it in my tier list video, but I still think that it's still pretty good. Even though Gargolem attack, which is pretty much better than in all ways possible, it still has that threatening coverage, and unlike Gargolem attack, it can consider running a Barbs setup, a more supportive role than Gargolem attack, so it's not a completely the same Loomian as Gargolem attack, which increases this thing's viability, and the fact that it doesn't need setup to hit hard because of its strong coverage. It's really good for Gargolem regular, and the fact that it kind of has mixed base stats, which most would argue is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing in Gargolem regular's place because it can tank a lot of stuff, it can outspeed a lot of stuff, and because of its coverage, it's threatening very good. It's very good threateningly, or whatever. So yeah, Gargolem regular is pretty good. I can see it going down in the tier list, but I think it's better than Borak, and it's definitely better than Gargolem defense. And let me just put Borak down. I'm sorry, Borak users. Next one, we're going to be talking about Sedimars, who honestly is still pretty solid even throughout all the stuff that it has been facing with. Its coverage is still really strong. Earth, fire, or electric coverage is still really good, mainly because there is not a lot of things that would want to switch into that coverage. I'm pretty sure nothing in the game can resist all of it, which is really nice for Sedimars. And more so of the fact that Sedimars' lack of resistances and weaknesses actually helps that out a lot, because Sedimars now becomes a soft check to most melee attackers and range attackers, and amplifying that with its good base stats and of power, Sedimars is now a good all-rounding Loomian that's really good. So there's not a lot of ways I can argue it for being it lower. I guess you can count Ice Cold Traps and the fact that it doesn't have a lot of energy, but recently we do have better stuff that has been solving that energy issue. So this is gonna make this a lot more better. And as for Ice Cold Traps, it's not as common as Barbs, so Ice Cold Traps, it won't have to be worried about that. So Sedimars overall can fit. No, it's still a good all-rounding wall Loomian that can still do a lot of damage and tank from both sides of the spectrum. And in my opinion, Sedimars can kind of fit on most teams aside from Hyper Offense. So yes, Sedimars is really great still. Next one, we have Gargolem Attack, and I do not really need to say anything about Tyrex, honestly. It's still really good, there's not much to say about it. So I'm just going to be talking more about Gargolem Attack. And people are thinking a lot about this Loomian, and I kind of agree with them to an extent. Mainly because Gargolem Attack still has that threatening coverage. It's the hardest hitting turn 1 Loomian in the game. It has a great speed tier to be in, and that's kind of it. However, because priority hasn't been an overwhelming thing in this metagame, not yet, Gargolem's lack of good bulk doesn't really hurt it as much as it should. So, one of the main ways we deal with Gargolem Attack is either bringing a Viscarna or a Stratosaur so to deal with it defensively, or simply by revenge killing it or hard swapping it into fast Loomians that can take it out. So that on its own forces a lot of pressure on the opponent, because now you're either forced to bring a Viscarna or Stratosaur or a Wintrix, or you have to sacrifice and gamble on an offensive Loomian to take a hit from Gargolem Attack and hit it back super effectively. This means that this thing is super good offensively. It provides so much pressure with it being on the field and it being out of the field. I do agree that Gargolem Attack is one of the Loomians that hits very hard but cannot get into the battle very easily without pivots. But as we know, there are a lot of great pivots in this game, like Luminami, Phagenauts, and now more offensive Loomians like Bellatrix and Zulong and Ikazune now getting their pivot moves. This makes Gargolem Attack really strong. I do have to say that it might be in the lower tiers just because of its bulk, but as of right now, it provides so much pressure. Pivoting has never been easy as it has before, and its only ways of dealing it offensively is, of course, outspeeding it. Now, I do kind of want to put that argument out there that you can run boots on Gargolem Attack to actually kill those Loomians that can outspeed you, but I don't really think it's worth it. Its coverage is too important right now to actually provide a lot of pressure. So A+ is where it stands for me. And finally, we have Tyrex. There's nothing much to say for Tyrex. Fits on a lot of teams. It's great in a lot of teams. So yeah. If you enjoyed the video and want to argue in the comments below, go do that. I think my tier list is pretty solid as for the earth types. If you want to see more analysis, then go check out my channel. And if you want to like and subscribe, go do that. I make great content in my opinion. However, of course, it's still ass because it's Loomian Legacy. And if you want to join the Discord server where I do have leaks, community stuff down there as well, and maybe a tournament that will be coming soon because school is about to end in a few months, so why not? So yeah, this is Cotton Stoops telling you, or reminding you, and signing off to tell you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.